Toshiba libretto, This is the Toshiba libretto. It came out in the mid-90s. It's a sub-notebook size PC or ultra mobile PC, and it's a thing of absolute glory. Look at it. Look at that. It's cool. It's tiny. But what about this? This is the Vulcan FlipStart. It's also an ultra mobile PC, but not many people know about this one, which is strange because frankly, this thing is nuts.
Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring, more on that later. But first, like every damn video on this channel, let's rewind, this time to the early noughties, a time when tech was getting smaller and smaller as opposed to absolutely mammoth like today's world of tech playing Tonka toy. God, I loved things like my little Nokia 7210, and one person who also loved it and indeed wanted to capitalise on shrinking tech was Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen. Allen wasn't alien to new ventures. In 1986 he founded Vulcan Inc. to oversee his family's business activities and philanthropic endeavours. In 1992 he co-founded Interval Research Corporation, a Silicon Valley new business incubator that generated over 300 patents, including some which he would later sue Apple, eBay, Facebook, Google, Netflix, and the Office Depot to name a few for violating. In November 93, he acquired 80% of Ticketmaster. In 97, he purchased National Football League's Seattle Seahawks, and in 98, he purchased Seattle's historic cinema theatre, quickly upgrading it to 3D capability. And that's just naming a few of his business side quests. So it's no surprise that with various companies having jumped on the ultra-mobile PC market, a term that wouldn't actually be coined until 2006 by Microsoft and Intel, but I'm using retrospectively. Including the infamous Toshiba libretto, Allen would like to get involved in something similar, especially given his ties to Microsoft. Previewed at the 2003 Consumer Electronics Show with the codename Mini PC, a show which, by the way, holds the Guinness World Record as being the largest consumer electronics show ever with over 116,000 people attending, and then first showcased in February at Seattle's 2004 Demo Trade Show, the same show that had launched the original Palm Pilot back in '96, the idea was simple: create a fully functioning Windows XP machine but in handheld form, and it certainly got the media's attention. But this wasn't the first computer of this type to be announced. The Ticket 83 was showcased 2 years prior at the Planet PDA Technology Show in Boston. The OQO Ultra Personal Computer had been announced in 2001 and was due out later in 2004, along with the then called Sony VGNU50 sans keyboard. What made the Vulcan FlipStart different was really the name behind it: Paul Allen. Given all these machines were going to run Windows XP, it seemed like the FlipStart should really be the one ahead of the game. However, ahead started to feel like behind when it took a further 3 years before the FlipStart was actually launched, with the first units shipping on the 27th of March 2007. Here's how they arrived, which I'm going to unbox as I explain the fact that in between its announcement and launch a lot changed. Politics, the world, tech, the manufacture process of Pear's soap, everything, which meant some of FlipStart's specs also changed. Original specs detailed a 5.8 by 4 by 1 inch size, just under a pound in weight, 2 to 6 hours battery life, a 20GB hard drive, 256 megabytes of RAM, a 5.6 inch HD TV quality display, and a Transmeta Crusoe CPU. The actual size came in a bit more at 5.9 by 4.5 by 1.6 with an extra half pound in weight. That might not sound a lot, but it makes a significant difference in a handheld device. However, double the amount of RAM, a 30GB drive, 1.1 GHz Intel Pentium M processor and 64 MB Intel Graphics Media Accelerator 900 try their best to make up for that. Even said, the FlipStart was now entering a world where literal pocket-sized devices like the BlackBerry were common in business, and where the first iPhone was starting its domination of the rest of the mobile world. Even Windows XP had been succeeded by Windows Vista, although really, that wasn't much of a problem. Roger Kay, president of Endpoint Technologies, commented on the FlipStart's launch. The only person who will want that is someone with a tremendous demand for mobility and isn't compromised by a lack of fully functional set. They might sell a few as executive jewelry, but they won't sell any more. But Alan was still very much convinced in its potential. Years ago, I began to imagine a super compact computer that would allow us to connect, communicate, work and relax no matter where we were. One that is intrinsically intuitive to use. FlipStart is the first commercial product to meet that vision. It simply works as expected. As you can see, we've got a lot in the box. A quick start guide, manual, battery, headphones, a little dock-like thing, a case, an AC adapter, a crap load of cardboard, and of course the FlipStart itself. First things first, we have to connect the battery. Now as standard, you actually get this chunky boy that gives up to 6 hours of life, or at least it may have done 17 years ago. Christ, 17 years, it's old enough to drive. We can then plug the AC adapter in, and boom, we have life. Windows XP life, well, after it boots. Honestly, seeing a standard PC boot screen on something like this is just so weird to me. One thing you recognise right away is the absolute build quality of this thing. It feels like some kind of nuclear grade military tech, like it would win in a game of chicken with a Nokia 3310. It's just so robust and firm feeling. It also feels immediately weird to be using Windows, even XP, on a device so small. And that's not just because we've largely abandoned devices like this, but it's also because, well, this feels like a desktop computer in tiny form. The screen is crisp, the mouse tracking is definite, plus the fact it weighs about the same as a desktop PC all add up to give it a larger-than-life feel. It's almost a little uncanny. This thing can do everything a desktop can within reason. We can play games, use applications, even connect to the internet with a built-in Wi-Fi, which is great for checking out sponsor SqSp. Just like the FlipStart, you know where you are with SqSp. It's solid, dependable, and it truly is such an easy way to build a website that not only looks good and has tons of features, including hosting events and posting blogs, but it has all the tools to help you with Blueprint AI offering curated layout and style options, along with optimized SEO tools so that you can show up in Google for the keywords that matter. One incredibly handy feature is the ability to swap between mobile and desktop views so that you can optimize your content for every device. Just head to Squarespace for a free trial, and when you're ready, go to squarespace.com/nostalgianerd to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So the FlipStart feels like a big PC in some ways, but the brains behind Vulcan knew that this very much wasn't a full-size PC, so we've got a number of features to help us cope with the change in scale a bit better. You'll note that the trackpad is over on the right, with the mouse buttons on the left, which is fine for most people. This works pretty well, especially as the pads can be tapped and scrolled like a modern-day trackpad. But if you don't fancy tracking, we've got one of those naughties nubs that people got into for a while. They're an acquired taste, but you can use it to fling the mouse cursor across the screen pretty rapidly. Next to the pad, you'll notice a discrete Ctrl-Alt-Delete button, which is considerate. And then you get the arrow keys in this singular, well, it's a D-pad, isn't it? At the bottom left, there are a couple of new buttons. This one brings up a dedicated FlipStart menu, which allows you to jump to files and common organization programs. The zoom button here is especially useful as it resizes the window you're currently using to good effect. You can then scroll about if needed. Press it again and you're back to normal. It's a neat feature. Standard media controls at the bottom, then over on the right is essentially an Alt-Tab button allowing you to flip between applications, and a desktop button which, well, it gives you the desktop. These are all very useful features, especially in the XP era. But how does it function? Let's start with the main villain, the keyboard. I mean, it's not ideal. I'm sure you could get used to it in the same way you got used to a ZX80 keyboard in the 80s, but it's more suited for thumb typing. The only problem is you need pretty large hands to use it in that way, rendering it a little tricky for typing. Compared to the Libretto, which had essentially a proper mini keyboard, the FlipStart lags behind. But for general Windows operation, it's pretty great. All you really need to do is connect up to a full-size keyboard and maybe a monitor, and well, then it's not really a handheld computer anymore, but the fact you can do these things makes it versatile. However, we need the right ports for that. On the front there, we've got our standard indicator lights. On the right, we've got a jog button, a headphone jack, and some media buttons on the lid for use when it's shut. The rear reveals one USB 2 socket, a power in, an expansion port, and a little heatsink, which pours out some pretty warm air. Oh, we also have a little screen on the top, which gives access to emails and the like when you don't want to open it up entirely. You can navigate using that jog button on the side. Pretty good for conserving battery life, but it does need to be on for you to use that. Plus, if you have an American version, you can also put a SIM card in here and connect up to your mobile network, which is pretty cool for 2007. If you were wondering about that expansion connector, that's where the port replicator plugs in, giving us a VGA out, speaker out, Ethernet and 2 USBs. It's kind of like a mini dock and it allows us to go into that full productivity mode. Hell yeah, this thing is pumping out 1280 by 1024 on our full-size monitor, along with 1024 by 600 on its own little screen with no sweat. Alright, maybe a little bit. But look at the size of it. It's nuts. You can push the built-in screen up to 1024 by 768 if you really want, but then you just have to scroll about. There's no need really because the standard resolution is decent and looks sharp as a pin. Okay, screw productivity. Let's try and play some games on this thing. You know what? It kind of works. Out of the box, the FlipStart shipped with the Quake 3 demo to show what it's really made of. And why not? Because this is pretty nice for gaming. The only times I've ran into trouble were trying to use these little arrow keys to play games, which are very much geared up to use standard arrow keys. If you use your thumb and pick it up, it's fine. Although Crazy Taxi is a bit of a pain because it requires you to hold forward most of the time. Yeah, maybe Typing of the Dead isn't the best game to play on this thing. But overall, it's honestly great. It's like a little Steam Deck almost. Ahead of its time in some ways. I can see many an executive getting in a quick blast on Grand Theft Auto on a lunch break. I mean, pop some headphones on and who's gonna know? Honestly, it's a shame this didn't sell better because it's both a crazy and incredibly professional bit of kit, and I can see why they're so sought after today. However, the FlipStart witnessed a slow uptake, with its US price slashed by $500 after just 6 months, and by January 2008 it was down to $699, or just £339 in the UK. By the middle of the year, all initial units had sold out, with Vulcan downing tools and making no more. With all warranties expiring a year later, support was withdrawn and the FlipStart faded into obscurity. The FlipStart felt like something that people wanted. It felt like something that could fit into pockets and be useful, but it was just a little too big and bulky for that. And if you're going to carry something about, you might as well make it something more usable like a laptop, especially given you could get more bang for your buck. Roger K, it seems then, was correct. It was jewellery, a gadget, a cool toy to show off with very few practical uses, and weirdly enough that's exactly what it remains today. Unless of course, you just want to use it as a very expensive and rare XP gaming handheld. In which case, go for your life. I salute you fully. Paul Allen fulfilled his tiny computer dream, and in many ways it was a great success. It does everything that he set out for it to do, and it does it well. It's just the market wasn't there for it by the time it came out. It was going in the opposite direction, and in just a few years we'd all be playing with great, massive iPads. It's a shame really, because tiny tech like this really is cool as hell. And I think it always will be.
So, there we go, that's the Vulcan FlipStart Ultra Mobile PC, and it's a fantastic piece of kit from the past. It's also just about to go on my eBay shop, which has just reopened, so If you want to pick this up or anything else, follow the link below and see what you find. Until next time, I've been Nostalgia Nerd. Toodaloo! Toshiba libretto, why do you come to my bar? Toshiba libretto. People walking past are like, what the hell is going on?